Well, I was waxing rhapsodic about spring and the delightful bursting forth of life that we see all around us every spring. And of course it was just lovely, and we all appreciate it, no doubt. But in actuality, if you look at your experience, it's always bursting forth, it's always springing forth. The present moment is always here in full force. It just bursts into your experience absolutely complete. You know, it doesn't come piecemeal. It's not like it comes a little bit at a time. You know, you're here in the room, and the room doesn't appear slowly. It's not like, oh, you see a little bit of chair, then you see a little bit of floor, and you see a little bit of wall, and you see some people, and you hear some sound, and it sort of pieces itself together like a jigsaw puzzle. It's not like that, is it? Everything just jumps out and bursts forth as a whole, as an entirety, complete in every moment, spontaneously, surprisingly, unexpectedly, with excruciating detail. You know, if you look at how much detail is present in your experience in the moment, you know, it's inconceivable. I mean, anything you could take a hair off your head and look at it closely under a magnifying glass or something, and it's just a universe. Let alone all the other hairs on your head and on everyone else's head, and the dust in the room, and you go out into the street and go out into the city and go out into the country and go out into the continent. I mean, the detail is obviously just stupefying. And of course it's fractal. You know, you back up and there's tons of detail. You zoom in and there's tons of detail. The whole thing is just inconceivably full, inconceivably present. Spontaneously, in the moment, poof! You know, always. There's no lapses. It's not like the present moment needs to take a breather and sort of shuts down and then it poofs back up, does it? It's always completely full, right here. You know, here you are, you're always here, it's always now. Effortlessly, complete, with the completeness, with entirety, with fullness. And it always completely surpasses your conceptions of it, your ideas of it, your interpretations of it. I mean, sure, I can say, yeah, we're sitting in the Hillside Club and we're having a talk and it's Wednesday and blah. I mean, I could make a litany of things I could say about this, but, you know, how many things could also be said that I'm not saying, no matter how much I said? You know, again, it's inconceivable detail. There's inconceivable room for interpretation, for elaboration, for, you know, describing. And all of these descriptions, the actuality is still more than that. No matter how much describing you do of what's going on in any instant, there's still more, no matter how much. And this is always true, every instant, in a new way. Every instant is completely new, completely different detail, spontaneity. So in truth, what we see, you know, enacted and acted out in springtime, of all this life force busting forth and the plants blooming and the birds breeding and all of that, is actually true every instant, always, just in the presence and nature of experience. What experience is, just your experience right here, just the simple fact, your normal experience of here you are and you're experiencing, right, like always. What it is intrinsically completely beyond anything you can think it is. So whatever you think this is that's going on here, no matter how sophisticated and how elaborate and how profound an understanding or idea you have of what this is, it is more than that. It is inconceivably more than that. So, and this is knowable. You can be with experience, you can be with the actuality of your experience beyond your ideas of it, beyond your understanding of it, because you are. You are also more than you could ever think you are. You are also intrinsically more than you could ever describe yourself to be. You don't know what you are. You can't say what you are. You can't describe what you are. You're beyond that. You're more than that. Then that moreness goes to an absolute degree, to a transcendental degree. So this experience that presents itself, as well as your being that experiences it, let's say, to look at it in those terms, are inconceivable and yet present, actual, not abstract. This is concrete. This transcendence is an actuality. You know, the inconceivable nature of this experience right here is actually the case right here, right now. It's not some notion or some abstraction or some philosophical point. It's actually and explicitly the case right here, right now. And you are also inherently in a condition of similar transcendence, of similar inconceivability, right here, right now, not as an abstraction, as an actuality. So you have the intrinsic capacity and capability to recognize the profundity of this event, because you have the profundity within you to meet it where it is. You already are meeting it, you already have met it, but not in any way that is describable, in any way that is thinkable, in any way that can be collapsed down to words or symbols. In other words, you can be and already are, with your experience, with inconceivable profundity, right here, right now. Now, we don't usually notice this fact because we've all been indoctrinated into a consensus reality and hypnotized by all of the sort of narrations of society around us, and people, you know, hi, how you doing? How'd your day go? You know, what are you up to? You know, what you been up to? What have you been doing with yourself? I mean, all this stuff it trivializes and minimizes this astounding inconceivability that this actually is, that you actually are, that you are always immersed in. This profundity is not addressed. It's not even acknowledged by and large in terms of human exchanges, human words, human thoughts. So there's no reinforcement for this transcendence, even though everyone is immersed in it all the time. There's the reinforcement for a kind of a dull, stupid, pedestrian version of life, of where we're all these sort of, you know, human beings struggling to make good in this difficult society and blah, 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 blah. You know. What about consciousness? Yeah. Well, of course I'm conscious. Yeah. Everyone's conscious. It's like, yeah, but look at it. Look at it. What is this? It's inconceivable. It's stupefying. It's mind-blowing. Consciousness. Light. Time. Change. You know, intelligence. What? These things are all right here, right now. They're completely obvious. They're explicit. You know, we all are acquainted with them with a profound intimacy. They're completely accessible. And yet, there's little encouragement or reinforcement in our day-to-day lives to be aware of it, to have our attention directed to it. You know, we're constantly being pulled upon to draw our attention into some kind of very silly, pathetic soap opera or drama that supposedly is being enacted by the people around us, and that they more or less expect us to be participating in eagerly. But it is possible to notice the actual profundity that is explicit right here, right now. You're already noticing it. You know, you may or may not be in the habit of having your attention directed to it, but it's always right here, right now, and you're always engaged with it with transcendental degree of profundity, whether you know it or not. And since that is the case, since it is a fact that you already engage with it, it's quite possible, and in fact easy to notice that fact, And noticing that fact will reveal to you what you are, what this is, and it turns out what you are and what this is astounding, absolutely astounding, and you've been completely misled about being a human being who has, a short lifespan on this pathetic veil of tears, living this absurd human life in this bizarrely warped culture, so on and so forth. What's actually going on it completely and utterly surpasses that. And it's actually plain to see. You're already seeing it. You always have been seeing it. It's actually plain to see if you have the wherewithal to notice it. And this noticing is available because, as I said, you already are doing it. So, and doing so is transformative. Doing so extricates you from this apparent pathetic human life that you may have felt you're in, and you will discover you're actually in a situation that is astounding, that is surpassingly beautiful, that is incredibly interesting and entertainment and meaningful, completely beyond the scope of anything in the wildest imagination of any human ever. It's already the case, and you already are that and have that available, simply for the noticing. You don't even need to achieve anything. You don't need to transcend anything. You just look around, see what this is. It already is what it is. You already are what you are. Just notice that fact as it is, and you get to enjoy what it is. Just that very, very simple reorientation of being with the fullness of your genuine experience is what has been referred to since time immemorial as realization, enlightenment, liberation, all of these, supposedly inconceivably glorious achievements of the epitome of human possibility, that's reserved for the 1 in a billion avatar or saint or something. Bullshit. It's your actual condition already. Ramana Maharshi is no different whatsoever than you are. He just happened to notice the fact of what he is. And you are, in fact, noticing what you are right now. All you need to do is let yourself notice that you're noticing. You don't even need to notice it because you're already doing that. You just need to notice that you're noticing. And what keeps us from doing that is we expect it to fall within the parameters of what we expect it to be. We expect it to be describable. We expect it to make sense. We expect it to show up as this or that. We expect it to have certain qualities that that we have these preconceptions, typically unconscious preconceptions, like a yardstick that we hold up to and say, nope, that's not it. Whereas if we just, without any reference points whatsoever, just notice this astounding presence as it is, simply what you might call your experience, and you will see quite clearly that it is astounding. And that simple fact is what all the fuss has been about, for as long as there has been spirituality. That simple fact, that simple event, that simple noticing is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So that's my sermon for tonight. If you'd like to discuss anything, if you wouldn't mind speaking into a microphone so people online can follow along with what you have to say. And if we're not discussing anything, or if you're not talking at the moment, I invite you to and recommend that you look around and notice how amazing this fact of what we call experience is. How inconceivable it is. I mean, what's happening? Here I'm experiencing. What's that referring to? What is this experience? I mean, just that simple question is like stepping off a cliff. How can you answer it? I mean, it's not like anything.
Peter, I have a question about a certain type of experience. It happens, to me mostly when I'm creating or doing something. In sports, people have called it being in the zone. But it happens to me a lot in writing when I'm struggling for like the perfect phrase or word. In cooking, just everything's going right, and there's a lot of struggle involved, especially in my writing. I just get so frustrated. But there's at a certain point, I don't know exactly what happens. The way I describe it is I had some kind of preconceived idea of how it was supposed to be. Or when I'm reading a recipe in a cookbook, I have a certain preconceived idea of the sequence. But at some point, and that just gets in the way. Mm-hmm. But at some point, I'm not too sure if I'm just giving up the concept or the idea, or if I'm, or there is sort of like the perfect way that I'm falling into. But something happens, and I say, okay, I've written that sentence over long enough, and it's great. Mm-hmm. And I just can't. It just seems like there's sort of like a perfect pattern that I fall into. Mm-hmm. And is it just because I'm just there and right now and just in the present?
Well, yeah, in a way. I mean, of course, you're always here right now in the present, and yet, most of us are used to relating to our experience in terms of various reference points. We're trying to accomplish something. We think we know who we are. We think we know what our abilities are. We think we know what we want. We think we know what our challenges are. We think we know what we're worried about. We think we know what we're hoping for. In other words, we have all of this sort of elaborate framework of worldview that we hold essentially in our imagination. And we're experiencing and functioning, but we're generally relating to that functioning to a certain extent in terms of this frame of reference, this framework, which is not liable to contribute to spontaneity. The creativity of reality is referenceless. It has no frame of reference it needs to conform to. So the way the present moment works, it just happens effortlessly as a flow. It spontaneously springs into existence completely. And the more we are functioning like that, the more perfectly and optimalized our functioning will be. And this is what, being in the zone and all that sort of thing refers to, getting out of your own way, which basically means stop relating to your functioning referentially, in other words, with reference to any conceptual worldview of what it is you think you're doing and what it is you think is going on, and just let it flow, let it rip, be with it spontaneously. And you are with the creativity of the present moment more primarily, so of course it is maximally efficient.
Yeah, I've had a feeling that it was I call it sort of dropping something, or
Yeah.
or what,
It's dropping.
shedding. I'm
Yeah.
shedding the frame of reference.
Yeah,
That's what's happening.
it's that simple. You're shedding the frame of reference. You're dropping into, you're allowing spontaneity. You can't do spontaneity. And think about it. You
Right.
can't okay, now I'm going to be spontaneous. I mean, even the fact that you're defining it, you're already being with it referentially. Spontaneity doesn't define itself as spontaneity. It just is. And likewise, your functioning, your creativity is optimized when you are likewise functioning just do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it can it seems like it happens. It seems like it could happen on a more primal energy level. I mean,
Yeah.
just
it is that. It's
just
exactly
trying to
that.
be with your energy move. There's some places that are better at that moment,
Of course,
and then
yeah.
other times I don't know. It's different.
And it's not task specific. It's not project specific. I mean, you can look at it in terms of athletics or writing or some task or mode of functioning that you find yourself engaged in. But in actuality, from moment to moment, you can be with your experience more or less referentially. You can be with your experience more or less definedly. And the less definedly you are with your experience, the more primally you are with it, let's say. I mean, we're sort of making up terms here, which aren't necessarily true, but it's still meaningful. And so, therefore, you are with your experience in the most efficient manner. You're engaged with what you really are, as you really are, rather than trying to be something. This is another simple way to put it. And this is, I mean, aside from functionality, this is also healing. You want healing. You want to heal yourself. You can find physical health this way. You can find emotional health this way. You can optimize all these modes just by letting go of holding anything as being anything, and let what is be what it is unencumberedly. And that by its very, I mean, the word heal etymologically comes from the word whole, wholeness, completeness, integrity. And when you let go of referentiality, wholeness is what remains.
Right.
This is a completeness. This is what it is. This is an actuality that is unifiedly itself. And that's the very essence of wholeness, of healing, and being with your experience, with your functioning, with your embodiment. In that mode is the most complete way you can be with it. And so it will certainly maximize the efficiency of your functioning, maximize the efficiency of your health, maximize the efficiency of your psychology, and maximize the efficiency of your worldview and your philosophy too. So we get these wonderful, realization and enlightenment and liberation, and all that comes from all and physical health and efficient functioning. All these things are spontaneous, you could say, side effects of being with your being non-referentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of counterintuitive in a way. I mean, if you think you're struggling for the proper, the best reference point, the most efficient, but in reality, it's just the opposite.
Yeah, it's like trying to help water find the best way downhill. You don't need to do it.
Yeah.
The water knows, okay? The water is like, bang, it's gone. It knows where downhill is. It doesn't need your help to get there. And likewise, your life force knows where to go. It doesn't need contrivance and planning and artifice and ambition to get where it wants to go. And so letting go, opening to all that is allowing your life force maximal integrity, putting the least barriers in the way of it, metaphorically.
Do you have any examples or guided walkthroughs of the practice of that letting go, of being non-referential?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the very easiest way is to find some area in your present experience that is below your radar, that you don't have opinions about, that you don't think very much about, that you don't even know particularly what it is, you don't care what it is. I mean, so like if you're in your visual field, I mean, these are people sitting around you, so you might think, oh my gosh, these are people, and all of a sudden it pulls your psychological strings about other human beings, and how am I going to relate to them, and blah, blah, blah. Or you look at something, you might think, God, this is an ugly, dark building, I hate it, you know. So anyway, so these are all things in your experience that do have some degree of presence for you in terms of your tendency to have a reaction to them, to hold them, to be meaningful. But you can find just some little place in the shadow somewhere where you can't really see what's happening. So it's not something that you can like or dislike or even know much about it, and yet it is experience. It's there, and so right away, just in that way, you're being with your experience less referentially. Or, you know, find a blank spot on the wall that, again, it just doesn't have much to do with anything that's meaningful to you, that you're reactive to one way or the other. See what I mean? So you've rather than trying to fight your way out of your frame of reference, you take advantage of the fact that the vast majority of your experience is already outside your frame of reference. There's all sorts of things in your experience at any moment that you don't know what they are, you don't have much opinion about them, they're just weird presences. Or you can go to some mental phenomena, just some little wisp of a mood or something, and you can't name it, you can't describe it, you don't know what it is, but it's just some little vibe or whatever, right, showing up in your experience. Or like in my earlier example, something in one of your sensory fields, maybe some sound. You know, you're hearing some, you know, hissing sound from the air conditioner, or you're just hearing some little buzzing in your ear, or just something that it's just nothing, it's just meaningless. And in that meaninglessness, it is relatively outside of your frame of reference, but it is within your experience. So you can be with that experience, and you're intrinsically with it non-referentially or less referentially, because it's already the case. In other words, our worldviews are very partial. They're very specific. They're like stick figures that aren't very well colored in or very well defined, and vast portions of our experience are left out. So like, another example would be, just go to something in your experience that you're not used to noticing. You know, the way the light glints off of a window pane, or, you know, the way a limb on a tree across the street is fluttering in the breeze, or something that's just a phenomena that's present, but it doesn't have much semantic content for you. It doesn't have much meaningfulness. It doesn't have much for you to be invested in one way or the other. And yet it is experience, and at that point you are with your experience less referentially. And so again, this is just a simple matter of taking advantage of experience that's already present, that is not particularly well defined for you in terms of your worldviews. And that may not seem like much. It may not seem like there's much point to it. But the point is to discover that experience is not dependent upon definition. Experience is not dependent upon being describable. Experience is intrinsically what it is, whether it's being described or not. And the description doesn't actually add anything to it whatsoever. And to be with the raw experience, you develop a sensitivity, you sort of train yourself to notice, to be aware of experience more primarily as it is, and and you developed a facility to be with your experience outside of your usual frame of reference, without needing to take on the frame of reference head on and dismantle it and all that, which is a big task, if it's even doable.
Hi, Peter. On Friday morning, the day after tomorrow, I'm going to Summit Hospital to get a pacemaker put in my chest for my heart.
Exciting.
Well, it's hard for me to get referential in your terms about that. I'm a little bit scared that things can go wrong, as they can do in hospitals. And but I'm not like terrified of that happening, but it can happen.
Sure.
And also, I mean, talking to the doctors and so forth, they seem to talk about this operation as a very positive, worthwhile thing for me to do. So it's exciting and a little scary and unknown.
Yeah.
And I don't know really. I've read some brochures and things that they've given me, but other than that, I don't really know much to approach it with. You need to come up with much of an attitude, really.
Yeah. And that's good.
Yeah.
Because that's the truth of it. You don't know.
Yeah.
What you're afraid of, like if suppose you have any fears about it, you're not actually afraid of it because you don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
You're afraid of your fantasies of what it might be, which is not it. That's just fantasies. And it's easy to conjure up any kind of a fantasy, then you can be afraid of it. But it has nothing to do with anything but the fantasy.
Right. Yeah.
So if it's easy to be anxious about a fantasy, or fearful about a fantasy, or hopeful about a fantasy. But the reality is just a big question mark. You don't know what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
You don't know what the reality of the experience is actually going to be. No idea.
Right.
It's like death is, of course, like that. Death is the big extreme of that. It's easy to go, oh my God, I'm terrified, I'm dying, I'm going to die. All this is going to stop. I don't know what's going to happen. It's like, but you're not afraid. If you're afraid of death, you're not afraid of death. You're afraid of your fantasy of death. Death is, you don't know what death is. So how can you be afraid of it? Death itself is, you won't know what death is until you're dying. And then you won't know what dying is until you're dying.
Right.
And you won't know what death is until you're dead. And until then, you're not qualified to have a reaction to it because you don't know what the reality is. And the reality will certainly be different than your expectation of it. Has anything whatsoever you've ever experienced been exactly like you expected it to be? Exactly like?
Probably not.
No. Never happened.
Yeah.
So all of our hopes and fears are never of actual events. They're always of fantasies of events which never happen. The actuality is always different. Always, in its details. And you notice that fact, and it's very liberating because all of a sudden, what's going to happen? I don't know. But isn't that how it's always been? What's going to happen tomorrow? I don't know. What's going to happen in 30 seconds? I don't know. What happened an hour ago? I don't know. I have a memory of it, but that's just another fantasy. What's happening right now? Anyone know what's happening right now? Anyone have the complete description of exactly what's happening right now? What's happening right now? I don't know.
All this.
All this, sure, arguably, if there isn't all in a this. But noticing that is kind of nice because it's real, it's true, and it's nothing to get bent out of shape about. It's just this.
Yes, like I don't really seem able to come up with any defined expectations about it anyway, so I kind of have to forget that doing that.
Sure, yeah. And that way you can approach it with interest. You can approach it with, wow, this is kind of a cool adventure. I wonder what it's going to be like. I wonder what's going to happen. So, and that's the truth of it, because you can't really go beyond that without just going into fantasies, which are just fantasies. It's not the event itself anyway, is it?
Right, no, certainly not. Yeah, okay. Thanks.
So have fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a question. Let's say that you're in a state where you're not attached to anything. It's all, everything's gone. In order to function in that state, you have to ascribe values to things, and as soon as you do that, you're out of the state, right?
Is that true? Do you have to do that?
I don't know.
Because ascribing values to things is itself not ascribing values to things. Ascribing value in the sense that ascribing values to things is a mysterious process which happens intrinsically. An example, for example, is driving. An experienced driver doesn't need to particularly think about driving when they're driving, do they? You don't have to think, well, let's see, I want to turn left, so I have to move my left hand down and my right hand up. I need to remember to take my right foot and pull it off the accelerator and put it on the brake, and I have to remember to push a little bit. I mean, you don't need to do that, do you? You just do it. And the doing doesn't require definition. You could say it's an energetic participation. It's like dancing. Like as I'm talking, I'm waving my hand around, for example. I don't have to think about it. I didn't think, oh, let me see, I'm going to say this, so I better hold my hand here and then slowly move it down here and then move it, That doesn't happen. I just they just wave them around. So it's functioning. I mean, when Trace of waving my hands around, it may be kind of a not very well defined functioning, but nonetheless it is functioning, and it doesn't require definition. It doesn't require thought, and we're used to thinking that it does. I mean, this is part of our worldview. Is, oh my God, if I don't stay on top of things, I'm going to be a basket case. I'm not going to be able to do anything. I'm going to forget how to put my underwear on. But how much thought do you really have to put into putting your underwear on? It's, how to do it. It's, well, some of us, You know what I mean? It's just, you just do it. It's a participation. Maybe when you were learning to put your underwear on, you had to give it thought. But you didn't really necessarily have to give it thought. You had to go through the motions several times. You may or may not have been thinking about it. Because we humans do a lot of talking, and we do a lot of, verbalizing in our heads, we're used to thinking we have to, and it's important for our functioning. But I'm not so sure about that. I think that most of our functioning is nonverbal. Most of our functioning is through a participation in an event that we learn through having participated in that event over and over again. We learn things by feeling. We learn things by movement. We learn things by repetition. That is more experiential than it is conceptual. So I question that. I question that. And again, thinking and talking are themselves nonverbal and themselves non-conceptual, because you don't need to think to think. Thinking comes up, and then you're thinking, but you didn't think about thinking before you thought. In other words, you didn't need to think about thinking to remember to think or to remember how to think. You just know how to do it. How do you know how to think? I'm saying all these words. These words are just spouting out of my mouth. How do I know how to do that? I don't know. They're just there, And there's not a whole lot of thought involved. I mean, I'm not sitting here thinking, oh, Missy, I have to remember, what word am I going to say next? What word am I, okay, I'll take that one, It's not like that. It's just a flow. It's an energetic participation, a lot like driving, a lot like anything that, you can do well or you've mastered. If you're a good tennis player, you can go up and play tennis. You probably don't need to think about it. You just know how to do it. You know the feel of it. You know the flow of it. And you can do it without a lot of thought. Or anything that you can do well, that you have any degree of mastery or familiarity with, is largely non-conceptual. And generally, even if there is thought happening in the process, it's just sort of along the side, like a side phenomena, rather than what's really doing the process. I mean, even your multiplication tables, you learn them by repetition, not by thought. 7 times 7 is 49. I don't have to think about that. I may think I'm thinking about it, but I'm not. I've said that sentence, several thousand times in my life, so I can say it again effortlessly because the pattern of saying it is ingrained, right? So the whole issue is an interesting one for sure.
There is a difference between driving and thinking. You can get out of the car. You can't stop thinking.
I disagree. I think all the time we're often not thinking. I think we may not notice the fact. I think thinking is a lot like moving. There's always some degree of motion, but a lot of times there's not much motion, and then sometimes there's a lot more motion. I think we're sensitized and trained to, approach our experience in terms of thought. So we're very sensitive to thinking, and so I don't think we're particularly sensitive to non-thought. And there's always non-thought going on, as a background in a context of thought, and also as thought actually sort of has ebbs and flows, just like physical activity, say, has ebbs and flows. And I think we're typically very insensitive to the ebbs and more sensitive to the flows.
I feel that I'm aware of the ebbs and flows.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not aware of the complete ebb, the cessation of thought.
Yeah, but
Maybe it comes out of awareness. I mean, it's.
I think that cessation of thought is a fantasy. I think cessation of thought is like cessation of sound. It's a fantasy that doesn't ever actually occur. Thought is arguably an aspect of our experience. Say it's a bandwidth or a field of our experience, kind of like the field of vision is a field of our experience. And I think there's always a vent there, just like there's always a vent in your field of vision, even if your eyes are closed, right? But I think the vast majority of that event is not thought per se as, oh, I'm thinking of this. In other words, it's not referential thought or conceptual thought, so much as just the presence of thought energy. Very much like in your field of vision, you're always seeing, but you may not particularly be saying, oh, I'm looking at a window. It's more like just sort of, there's just presence of whatever is actually there, less focused or delineated. And I think that the field of thought is very similar. But again, I think we're confused about the actuality of thought because we place such a high value on conceptual thought that we aren't aware of all the non-conceptual thought that actually is part of our experience, in my personal opinion. I think there's ranges. I think thought is a range. It's a continuous spectrum. And I think above a certain threshold, it's like, oh, I'm thinking and I'm thinking thoughts. But I think below that threshold, I'm still thinking thought per se, although it doesn't look like thoughts so much as just looks like, the Northern Lights or something. It's just sort of an energy event or presence that is relatively not specifiable or definable or,
But still activity of some sort.
Yeah, there's nothing but activity of some sort. Experience is a dynamism. Experience is an active radiance, an active presence intrinsically. And of course that includes what we call the mind or thought. Any experience whatsoever is never it's never a non-event. It's never turned off. It's never at a 0 point. Was there online?
Someone's asking about precognition. I'll just read you what they wrote. I find I have always had a skill for precognition. I often know seconds before a song plays on the radio what the song will be. I wonder if you could address precognition. Is it a learned skill, thought of ebbs and flows, or just something? Anyway, they want to know what is your experience of the thing that is regarded conventionally as precognition, or is there any such thing?
Well, manifestly that's what could be called precognition, but exactly what it is can't be said. You can't pin it down. I mean, I might have a feeling the phone's about to ring, and then lo and behold, the phone rings. And it might happen again. I might feel like the phone's going to ring, and then lo and behold, the phone rings. Or I might be, having a sense of some topic, and all of a sudden someone mentions it. I've had experiences that could be described like that, for example. But what's happening there? What's going on there? Well, how can you say what's going on? How can you say what's going on anywhere, anytime? All you can do is observe the event and observe, oh, that's interesting. But you can't really qualify what it is or how it works unless you can say specifically what it actually is and how it actually works, and that can't be done. It's impossible to say exactly what anything is or exactly how anything works in experience, because it's transcendental in its nature, it's infinite in its nature. You can't pin down, you can't get to the bottom of things and say, yeah, now I finally got it. Now I know exactly what this is. I see it. I've got the details. It's I've gotten to the bottom line. I have the conclusive final answer to exactly what this is. It doesn't work like that, does it? There's always more. There's always endless subtlety. There's endless nuance. There's endless indeterminacy inherent in what is present. So you can't pin these things down. You can observe empirically that the phenomena seems to occur, but other than that, what can you do? You can have all sorts of theories about it, but they're just theories. You can have theories about anything. I mean, let's take something simpler and more obvious and less, not so commonly considered paranormal. How about just vision? I mean, right now there's vision appearing in your consciousness, I assume. I know there is in mine. How's that work? How is vision appearing in consciousness? Where's the consciousness coming from? How's the vision work? Where's the light coming from? I mean, I close my eyes and there's still light. I go to sleep and there's still light. I start dreaming and there's still light. So what is that? Well, how can you answer that question? All you can do is observe the phenomena. You can be with it very profoundly, but you can't define it. You can't pin it down. You can't say what it is or how it works or what it isn't. So. Does it seem to be possible to read people's minds? Sure. Does it seem to be possible to know what's going to happen in advance sometimes? Sure. But so what? What does that mean? I don't know. What's happening when that happens? I don't know. We think of things like that as unusual because we think we know what normal is, and then we think that something like that is not normal, but that's absurd. We don't know what normal is in the first place, and so we can't therefore define something else as not being normal because we're wrong in the first instance. We don't know what normal is. I really want to emphasize that this is all about you. This is all about your experience is here now. And wow. Just wow. And all this description and discussion and how's this working, how's that working, what's this and what's that is all very interesting, but it's like, how about the basic fact of, wow, you exist, you're experiencing, and all of these things are or not discussable because of that. Because your experience exists, we can talk about all these things, all these ideas and possibilities. It's like a TV. Because the TV works, you can get all these channels and movies and shows and advertisements and all this stuff. So the details are all there because the TV works. What's up with that? So all these things we can talk about or think about are only discussable or even considerable because you're experiencing, you exist, you're real. And that's the interesting issue, not all these little minutiae of what seems to happen within that and differentiating it and comparing it and qualifying it. It ain't about what show's on, it's about the fact that the TV works at all and exists in the first place. John?
Okay. The person didn't put this in very, I mean, it's a brief question. It's just the way he says is, let me see if I can find it. It's a way back. What is your ultimate goal in your remaining years? Well, but there's a little bit more to it. I asked him, do you want me to ask Peter, or is that hypothetical? And he says, just asking a truth or dare question. Then I said, well, do you still want me to ask him? That doesn't answer my question to him. And he says, I don't have long myself, so I asked that realistically. So I don't know what that means.
I have no goals whatsoever. I'm a happy man. If this was my last moment, I would die in ecstasy. I could expand on that a little bit, and also emphasize that the fact of the presence of your experience, which is always right here, right now, is complete fullness. You can never get outside it. You can never improve it. You can never diminish it. It will always look different, but uncontrollably and unstably. So anything you could do or achieve would just be an experience. And anything you could lose or fail at would just be an experience. And the one experience wouldn't be more or less of an experience than another experience. To go back to our popular TV analogy, you can watch the most beautiful event in the world on TV, or you can watch some horrible, pathetic, gross, disgusting thing on TV, and it would just be TV. It would just be patterns of light flashing on a screen and sound coming out of a moving piece of paper. And likewise, your experience is, what does your experience consist of? It's always a field of vision full of light in various patterns, field of hearing full of sound in various intensities and frequencies and so on, field of sensation full of little tingles and various intensities and localizations and so on. Same taste and smell. Thought, field of mentality, all sorts of presence of some kinds of thought energy in various patterns and configurations. It's always just that. You're having a peak experience, it's just that. You're having a total doldrum, horrible, boring experience, it's the same. It's just that. Is your field of vision more full of light when you're having a great experience? Is it less full of light when you're not? When you're having some boring experience or some horrible experience? It's basically the same. Just like a TV program of something transcendental and wonderful, like Princess Di's Wedding or something, or a TV program of something horrible, like a Hitler speech or something, It's just patterns of light on the screen, and the screen is just as full of light in either case. There's slightly different patterns flashing, but that's always changing anyway. The patterns are just changing, flashing patterns, changing patterns. Here we are, flashing patterns of light. The talk is over, you get up and go, you walk out the door, flashing patterns of light. You go home, you lie down in bed, flashing patterns of light. You go to sleep and you're completely sound asleep, flashing patterns of light. You start dreaming, flashing patterns of light. You wake up, you go to work, you have a horrible day, your boss yells at you, you whatever, flashing patterns of light. So when you see this, you stop fixating on this pattern or that pattern as being so all important, and you get that there's a fullness of energy that's always present just in the presence of the field of experience. The field of experience is always full, right? Is your field of vision ever fuller than it is right now? Is it ever emptier than it is right now? It's always exactly the same. Is your mind ever fuller or emptier than it is right now? I mean, it may seem to be busier or not. It may seem to be more coherent or not, but it's always just weird patterns flashing around unstably, unpredictably. Same with your field of hearing. It's always full of sound, different sounds, different intensities, different frequencies. Again, with unpredictable patternings. But it's always just, it never leaves the field of sound and becomes something else. You don't ever step out of your experience and go somewhere else, do you? So it's always just that. It's always just the TV sitting there. And what difference does it make what program's on? It's just TV. It's never going to be better or worse. It's just a TV set with patterns of light flashing. And likewise, our experience is just this bizarre, inconceivable presence of consciousness full of unpredictable patterns of energy. It never gets fuller. It never gets less full. It's just right here. Experience is always a constant. It always looks different, but it never is different. It's always exactly the same. Your consciousness is always completely here. Your sense fields are always completely here.
There's a question. Let me find it. Things move. Okay, here we go. I don't like the word hope because hope takes us away from the reality of here and now. I like to live in the present. I wonder if Peter feels the same way about the word hope. Hope makes us think of the future rather than now.
Well, hope is always related to fantasy, and fantasy never comes true. Whatever you hope or fear, for that matter, will never precisely happen, because experience, the actuality of experience, always deviates from expectation. So hope is relating to fantasy, so who cares? It's like, oh boy, I'm afraid of the boogeyman. Well, there is no boogeyman, so who cares if you're afraid of it? So what? You're relating to a fantasy. It's not actual, so why waste your time? Why waste your time? Oh, I'm really worried about such and such. I really hope for such and such. It's a fantasy. It's like, I hope for world peace. Yeah, that's going to happen. I hope our political system straightens itself out. Yeah, that's going to happen. I hope people all of a sudden become altruistic and loving and benevolent. Yeah, that's going to happen. What's going to happen is always going to diverge from your concepts of it, your expectations of it, whether it's hopes or fears or however you're holding it. Always going to diverge. You can say, well, tomorrow I'm going to get out of bed. Okay, that's a very loose statement. Your actual experience of getting out of bed tomorrow will be different than you picture it right now. What you actually experience when you get out of bed tomorrow is going to look different than you picture it now. No matter how you picture it, try it. Try it. I mean, sometime when you're going to bed at night, just formulate a real clear picture of when I get out of bed tomorrow, my experience is going to look exactly like such and such. And then wait and see what happens. It's going to look different. Always. I have to phone so-and-so and the conversation is going to go kind of like this. No, it's not. It's going to be different than you expect. Event is always, always, always divergent from expectation. So hopes and fears, for that matter, any kind of, or even neutral expectations, have nothing to do with actual events. It has nothing to do with what happens. It only has to do with your fantasies, which don't ever happen. So it's just it's a waste of energy. It's a silliness.
I was going to say one thing about you. A few minutes ago, you were talking about things being the same so much in our experience, but it seems like, sometimes it's not always light. Sometimes you can turn the light off at night to go to sleep or whatever, and it's dark, and it's quiet, and sometimes quiet to the point of silence. Maybe not for very long, but...
Okay, here, let's try an experiment. Okay, here's my suggestion. You can put the mic down, close your eyes, put your hands over your eyes so they're really tight. Let's just make it as dark as you can. Leave your eyes closed. Now tell me what you see. Be precise. Be precise. Don't generalize.
There is some movement happening.
There is, isn't there? Isn't that something?
And a movement of light and dark in a way.
Isn't that interesting? So you're in basically total darkness and there's still movement of light and dark. Interesting. When you're going to sleep at night, try the same experiment. You have your eyes closed, you're drifting off, you're like, just like the world is basically faded away, but you're not seeing nothing. We can say, oh, it's dark, I'm not seeing anything. But that's just a description. But again, see, this shows an example that descriptions always deviate from the facts. If you look at the actuality of your experience, there is always light present in the field of vision. In fact, the field of vision is always full of light. It can be different intensities of light. It can be seemingly brighter or darker or more patterned or less patterned or whatever, but it's always full of light. Same with the field of sound. You can try the same experiment with your hearing. Go into a really, really, really quiet room, and you'll find you hear sound. Same thing with any sensation whatsoever. Go in a sensory deprivation tank where your sense of touch is minimized. You're floating in a body temperature water, and you're not touching anything, and God knows what, right? You're going to feel. You're still going to feel because the sense field is intrinsically full of energy. The sense fields are never blank. Experience is never neutralized. It's never blank. It's always busy. Now the patterning has a broad range of what it can look like, right? So your field of vision looks very different when it's daylight and the sun's in your field of vision and your eyes are open to when your eyes are closed and you're in a darkened room. Obviously, it looks very different in many ways, but it's still a full field of sensory experience. In other words, the field of vision never shuts down and stops to existing. It's always present as a field of vision, and it always has event in it, and that event shows up as the experience of light. And likewise with all the other sense fields. Play with it. Try it. Again, we have these sort of loose descriptions of, oh no, when in the dark you're not seeing, when when it's quiet you're not hearing, but be more precise and look really at your experience, and you'll find that's not actually so.
Thank you.
It seems to me that I can identify a texture of who this person is. And it isn't ever stationary or still,
Right.
but it is identifiable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the flashing lights, it's something deeper than that.
Sure.
But it is a texture of who this person is. It's not I.
Sure.
And that is always there, whether I'm asleep or awake or listening or not listening or whatever.
Sure. But it's always full. It's always itself.
Oh yeah,
It never diminishes.
No.
And it's not dependent upon circumstance to be what it is. In other words, it's not going to, it won't stop being what it is if some particular circumstance happens, and it doesn't become more itself if some circumstance happens in the experience, right?
I have the impression, and there's no way to know, but that it's exactly the same as it was when I was 7 years old.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That it's sort of like a life force or something. I mean, I don't want to give
Sure.
it a name, but it's there, and it actually has an influence on what I see, feel, hear.
Sure.
Even in those moments when there's no outward stimulation.
Sure, yeah. But having said that, and I agree with you, I've acknowledged the actuality of that presence, it also itself is intrinsically transcendental.
Oh, absolutely.
In other words, you can't pin it down.
Absolutely
It is
not.
infinite and bottomless and sort of turtles all the way down kind of thing.
I first became aware of it with LSD, but it wasn't. That's when I became aware of it. That wasn't when it started.
Right. Yeah, sure.
I try to identify the qualities of it, but the qualities of it are the infinite qualities of experience. But I still want to try to identify the essence of it, and one thing that comes to mind of the essence is addiction to experience, not wanting to stop experience, in the kind of a way of not wanting to have a movie end, not wanting to go to sleep, not wanting to die. I think all that plays into it, that there is this addiction to experience that is behind the creation of all experience, that is the essence of it.
Okay. But qualifying it as an addiction implies that there's some alternative.
It's a driving force.
Sure, I agree.
I don't know if there.
It's,
The alternative would be no driving force, but there's a.
But is there ever not a driving force?
No, it's no.
So, I would say there is a force. There is a I call it a radiance. I call it radiance. There is a primal shining forth. There is a primal engagement, let's call it. Experience is intimately, profoundly, and unstoppably engaged with itself. But notions of addiction, notions of, not wanting it to end, all these kinds of notions are based on, I think, again, fantasies that it could end, fantasies that it could be alternate, it could not be, it could be not, it could be disengaged somehow. And I think there's no evidence for that. I think it's like saying the sun is addicted to shining. The sun can't not shine. The sun is a shining. It's what it is. And it doesn't need to want it or not want it. I think that's, personalizing something that is inherently not like that is inherently well, not individualized. I think that, yes, there is a profound force. There is a forcefulness. There is an engagement. There is a, and that is profound, for sure. I agree with you. And I think that is the essence of what this is, of what we are, and that force and engagement is transcendental in the sense that it comes from a depth and a non-circumstantiality that is beyond life, that is, or beyond our life, beyond our circumstance as our personality and being in our circumstance and being in our life and all that kind of thing. And I think noticing and appreciating that force is a profound meditation, and is also profoundly it was a profound revelation, and you can tune into your being on a very primal level, on a very transcendental level, by appreciating this forcefulness. This force is what was referred to and meant in the ancient Vedas as the force of Om, the force of the primal urge, the force of Shakti, shining forth in terms of Hindu symbology, and so on and so forth. So I think that this force, this forcefulness, this engagement, this primal desire, you can call it too, I think is a very essential and primal aspect of reality itself, aspect of what you are, of what this is. And I think noticing that and becoming aware of it as it is very revealing.
And there's a drive of it to know itself.
Yeah, that's what it is. It is a drive to know itself. Absolutely. I agree, and I think that's a very, as I say, I think that's a very primal reality. It's powerful to notice that. I mean, it's the life force itself. I mean, it's one way of putting, or tapping into, of noticing the life force itself. This profound, this urge, this primal urge.
And it helps to pull the reference away. As noted, it's the same whether you're 7 or 70. It's also the same whether you're an ant or a human. It's there behind all of it in a million faces.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, let me find the question again. Okay, well, some who have near-death experiences say they see a white light. Does this white light relate to an energy or leaving the body, or question mark?
White light is what there is. White light is the basic energy of experience. And it's a similar light you see when you go to sleep. And for that matter, it's a similar light you see when you wake up. But yeah, for sure. When you experience outside the context of any reference point, it shows up as a presence of light, a presence of radiance. And near-death experiences certainly are abandoning a normal reference point, but going to sleep is abandoning a normal reference point too. I mean, to whatever extent you can, when you're drifting off to sleep, when there's still a little bit of consciousness left, but you basically have tuned out the room, you've tuned out the bed, you've tuned out everything. You're just kind of like, right? But there is this sort of presence. There's this warm. You're basking in the kind of a warm, present, textural presence, a warm, fuzzy, whatever. I mean, you could call it a light, call it there's not really words for it because it doesn't show up discreetly, and you're not in a frame of mind to be qualifying it anyway, because you're not being with it in terms of defining it. But at the same time, you are experiencing it. And it's quite possible to begin to notice this more specifically and more profoundly, And I suggest this: play with, when you're going to sleep, play with it as, well, this is what leaving the world is like, and feel what it's like, And you do this at least once a day, probably, where you drift off to sleep. So you have this experiment, so you can experiment with it. And play with it and notice what it's like to drift away from referring to your experience as world to going to just your experience as a sort of an undefined presence. And again, it's something we do spontaneously, at least every day. So I recommend exploring that. And your dying will not be wholly dissimilar, I'm quite sure. Those of you that have, you're having surgery, for example, those of you that have had general anesthesia, it's a similar experience. It's fascinating when the anesthesia begins to kick in. If you have enough presence of consciousness to notice the phenomena before you're completely gone, and even when you are completely gone, that's fascinating too. But as the world fades away, presence doesn't fade away. You're still there. There's still this presence, very much like there is when you're going to sleep, although with a different kind of a texture to it. And no doubt when you're dying, you will experience something similar, where all of this particular patterning as the world, as the details of the circumstances you seem to be in your environment, fades away in relevance, but presence doesn't fade away. There is some quality of radiance, there is some quality of, call it light. The basic stuff of experience is like a light, it's like a radiance, it's like a presence. And again, you can notice this probably most easily, since we repeat it so often every time you go to sleep. Just sort of, try a little sort of a hypnotic suggestion of, when I drift off to sleep, don't be too focused about it, be sort of gentle and playful, it'll be more effective. Just when I drift off to sleep, I'm just going to sort of feel what it feels like. And you retain just enough self-awareness when you're really just you're pretty gone, but you'll still be like, oh wow, look at that, yeah. And you'll notice there's presence, there's light, you're in a warm field of fullness. It's not like going to sleep is losing anything, right? I mean, we're not generally afraid of going to sleep. We don't go like, oh no, I have to go to sleep again. Oh no, I'm going to lose everything. It's not like that, is it? When you go to sleep, it's like letting go into a fullness, isn't it? So it's not a loss. It's not a sense of, oh, I'm going to have something stripped away from me. On the contrary, it's a relief to let go of all of this specificity and having to relate to this and that and having to sort it all out and just, just go into this nice, warm richness of presence. And again, it is a presence that is a fullness. And again, you can experience this quite specifically and notice it by playing with it, by experimenting with it, since you do it so often. We only have a few more minutes, so if there's anything that's been in the back of your mind that hasn't been brought up, now would be a good time. And your experience that is present right here is the fountain of all discovery. The most esoteric spiritual truths are discernible right here, just by looking at your experience. Realization, transcendental liberation, samadhi, the Atman. I mean, depends, I don't know what sort of a background you're approaching these things from, but all of that, all spiritual theory and all spiritual achievement, and all spiritual absolutes refer to nothing whatsoever other than what the actual presence of your experience right here, right now is. And it's available. It's right here. You're available. You're engaged with it. Simply being with your experience as it is, unconditionally, which you already are, unstoppably, right? Simply being with that and let yourself appreciate it, let yourself experience the weirdness of it, the fullness of it, the astounding quality of it. Anything whatsoever that couldn't be realized in the very heights and pinnacles of spirituality are right here, completely accessible, just in your normal experience that you always have, that never goes away unstoppably. It's that simple. And all of this stuff has been mystified, and we've been terrified of it because it's been, spelled in capital letters, enlightenment, this fabulous thing. Maybe in 100,000 lifetimes I'll be worthy to even consider embarking on this. It's all bullshit. It's all PR. It's all advertising, It's all self-importance. It's just this simple fact, a simple present fact of experience is the whole deal. All the big, flashy, enlightenment, liberation, realization, the Dharmakaya, the Atman. It's just this. It's just this simple fact right here, as it is. Thanks for the sound effects. This is the voice of your God. Anyway, thanks very much for coming, and have a lovely evening.